The history of philosophy aims to give a connected account of the different attempts which have been made to solve the problem of existence, or to render intelligible to us our world of experience. It is the story of the development of recent human thought, from its earliest beginnings down to the present time, not a mere chronological enumeration and exposition of philosophical theories, but a study of these in their relation to one another, the times in which they are produced, and the thinkers by whom they are offered. While every system of thought is more or less dependent on the civilization in which it arises, the character of preceding systems, and the personality of its author, it in turn exercises a potent influence on the conceptions and institutions of its own and succeeding ages. The history of philosophy must therefore endeavor to insert each world view in its proper setting, to understand it as a part of an organic whole, to connect it with the intellectual, political, moral, social, and religious factors of its present, past, and future. It must also attempt to trace a line of progress in the history of human speculation, show how the mental attitude called philosophy arises, how the different problems and the solutions that are offered provoke new questions and answers, and what advance has been made on the different stages towards reaching the goal. In dealing with the different systems, we shall be careful to let the authors present their ideas without extensive criticism on our part. It will be found that the history of philosophy is, in a large measure, its own best critic. That a system is continued, transformed, supplemented, or overcome by its successors, that the errors and inconsistencies contained in it are brought to light, and that it is often made the starting point of new lines of thought. The historian should assume an impartial and objective attitude in his study, and, so far as he can, guard against obtruding his own philosophical theories into the discussions. It will, however, be impossible to eliminate the personal element altogether. To some extent, the historian's preconceptions are bound to shine through his work. They will manifest themselves in many ways. In the emphasis which he lays on particular philosophies, in his notion of what constitutes progress and decline, even in the amount of space devoted to different thinkers. All this is unavoidable. The philosopher, however, should be permitted to tell his own story. The philosopher, however, should be permitted to tell his own story. The philosopher, however, should be permitted to tell his own story without being interrupted by constant objections before he has had the opportunity of stating his case completely. And we should not criticize a system solely in the light of present achievement, that is, measure it by present standards to its hurt. Compared with modern theories, the early Greek worldview seemed naive, childish, and crude, and it would be no great mark of intelligence to ridicule them, whereas regarded from the standpoint of their times as the first efforts of a people to understand the world, they may well stand out as an epoch. They may well stand out as epoch-making events. A system of thought must be judged in the light of its own aims and historical setting, by comparison with the systems immediately preceding and following it, by its antecedents and results, by the development to which it leads. Our method of study will therefore be historical-critical. The value of the study of the history of philosophy ought to be apparent. Intelligent persons are interested in the fundamental problems of existence, and in the answers which the human race has sought to find for them on the various stages of civilization. Besides, such a study helps men to understand their own and other times. It throws light on the ethical, religious, political, legal, and economic conceptions of the past and the present by revealing the underlying principles on which these are based. It likewise serves as a useful preparation for philosophical speculation, passing as it does from the simpler to the more complex and difficult constructions of thought. thought. It reviews the philosophical experience of the race and trains the mind in abstract thinking. In this way, we are aided in working out our own views of the world and life. The man who tries to construct a system of philosophy in absolute independence of the work of his predecessors cannot hope to rise very far beyond the crude theories of the beginning of civilization. Science and philosophy may be said to have had their origin in religion. Or rather, originally science, philosophy, and religion were one. Mythology is the primitive attempt to understand the world. Man at first interprets the phenomena which, for some reason or other largely practical, attract his attention according to his crude experiences. He projects his own nature into them, fashions them after his own image, animates them, regards them as somehow alive and ensouled. Among many people, such vague and indefinite animistic notions are transformed into clear and distinct conceptions of personalities of a higher order than human beings, but yet essentially resembling human beings. Polytheism. None of these mythological creations, however, can be regarded as the work of single individuals or as the product of logical thought. They are expressions of the collective soul in which imagination and will play the most important role. A universal history of philosophy would include the A universal history of philosophy would include the philosophies of all peoples. Not all peoples, however, have produced real systems of thought, and the speculations of only a few can be said to have had a history. Many do not rise beyond the mythological stage. Even the theories of Oriental peoples, the Hindus, Egyptians, Chinese, consist in the main of mythological and ethical doctrines and are not thorough-going systems of thought. They are shot through with poetry and faith. We shall therefore limit ourselves to the study of the Western countries and begin with the philosophy of the ancient Greeks, on whose culture our own civilization in part rests. We shall follow the customary classification of universal history and divide our field into ancient philosophy, medieval or Christian philosophy, and modern philosophy. The sources of our study will be 1. The works of the philosophers or the fragments of their writings, in cases where only the latter are extant primary sources. 2. In the absence of either of these, we have to depend for our knowledge of their teachings on the most trustworthy and accurate accounts of them by others. Among the sources which will help us here are expositions of the lives and doctrines of particular philosophers, general and special treatises on the history of philosophy, criticisms of certain teachings, and references to them in various books. Such secondary sources are indispensable where the primary sources have disappeared. But even when this is not the case, the secondary sources are of great value insofar as they may throw light on the systems with which they deal. The historian of philosophy will seek help from all works that contribute to our knowledge of the subject, and among these, the secondary sources play an important part. He will also appeal to whatever fields of research may give him an understanding of the spirit of the times under examination, to the history of all human activities, such as science, literature, art, morals, education, politics, and religion. Few of the ancient peoples have advanced far beyond the mythological stage, and perhaps none of them can be said to have developed a genuine philosophy except the Greeks. It is for this reason that we begin our account with them. They not only laid the foundations upon which all subsequent systems of Western thought have been reared, but formulated nearly all the problems and suggested nearly all the answers with which European civilization occupied itself for 2,000 years. Their philosophy is one of the best examples of the evolution of human thinking from simple mythological beginnings to complex and comprehensive systems that any people has furnished. The spirit of independence and the love of truth which animate their thinkers have never been surpassed and rarely equaled. For these reasons, a study of Greek philosophy ought to be an attractive and valuable discipline to the student interested in higher speculative thought. By the history of Greek philosophy, we mean the intellectual movement which originated and developed in the Hellenic world. We shall include in it, however, not only the systems of the Greek themselves, but also those which exhibit the essential features of Greek thinking and which are manifestly the products of Hellenic civilization, whether they flourish at Athens, Rome, Alexandria, or in Asia Minor. 2. The people whose philosophy we are to study inhabited the mountain peninsula of Greece, a territory whose natural characteristics were favorable for the production of a strong, an active race, and whose many harbors, while encouraging navigation and commerce, furnished an outlet for emigration over the islands to the lands beyond. Greek colonies were established in the unbroken chain from the mainland to the coasts of Asia Minor and eventually to Egypt, Sicily, southern Italy, and the Pillars of Hercules. Without losing touch with the mother country, these colonies enjoyed the benefits which active contact with peoples of different customs, traditions, and institutions is apt to bring. The wonderful economic progress resulting from such conditions, the development of commerce, industry, and trade, the rise of cities, the accumulation of wealth, and the increasing division of labor exercised a profound influence on the social, political, intellectual, and religious life of the entire Greek world and opened the way to a new and richer civilization. This physical and human environment helped to stimulate both intellect and will. It gave men a broader outlook upon life and the world, quickened the spirit of criticism and reflection, led to the development of unique personalities, and made possible a varied progress along the lines of human thought and action to a people naturally endowed with keen and quick intelligence, a burning thirst for knowledge, a fine sense of beauty, and practical energy and ambition. It supplied the materials upon which to try its powers and talents and enabled it to make rapid progress in the field of politics, religion, morals, literature, and philosophy. The political fortunes of the Hellenic city-states on the mainland and in the colonies exhibit certain common characteristics. Everywhere we find an evolution from the patriarchal monarchy through the aristocracy to democracy. The society described by the Homeric epics is a caste society and the form of government a patriarchal monarchy. The acquisition of wealth and culture by the few leads to the establishment of aristocratic forms of government and, as time goes on, to the rise of oligarchies. With changing social conditions, the citizen class, the demos, arises and begins to dispute the leadership of the privileged class, and through the efforts of bold and ambitious men who wrest the power from the lords, tyrannies are established throughout the Hellenic world. During the 7th and 6th centuries BC, in the end, the people themselves assume the reins of government, and the tyranny gives way to the democracy. We may view these conditions as the result of the awakening of the Greek consciousness. The new movement is both a symptom and a cause of enlightenment. The new movement is both a symptom and a cause of enlightenment. It is the outward sign of growing reflection and criticism of the traditional. It issues in a protest against the old institutions and in a demand for reform. The history of Greek Literature before the 6th century BC reveals the development of a spirit of reflection and criticism similar to that expressing itself in political life, the Homeric cheerfulness and objectivity characteristic of the naivete of childhood gradually disappear. The poets become less optimistic, more critical and subjective. Already in Homer we find occasional moral reflections on the behavior of men, the foolishness of mortal, the misery and transitoriness of life, and the wickedness of injustice. In Hesiod, the note of criticism and pessimism grows louder. His works and Days is a moral handbook that attacks the foibles of the age and offers moral maxims and practical rules of life, praising the homespun virtues and lamenting the decline of the good old days. In mournful and satiric strain, poets of the 7th century, Alcaeus, Simonides, Archilochus, decry the rise of the tyrannous and deplore the weakness of men, urging them, however, to bear their lot bravely and to leave the outcome to the gods. The didactic and pessimistic spirit is still more marked in the poetry of the 6th century. The political fortunes of the people are made the subject of discussion, and the new order of things is condemned. Often with great bitterness. To this period belong the fable writer Aesop and the so-called gnomic poets, Solon, Phocylides, Theognis, whose wise maxims embodying ethical reflections may be characterized as an embryonic moral philosophy. The truth is, the individual is beginning to analyze and criticize life, not merely living it, but pondering on it. He is no longer content to give voice to the customary conceptions and ideals of his race, but is prompted to set forth his own personal, ethical, political, and religious thoughts and yearnings. Eventually, this spirit of inquiry and discontent, which results from larger and more complex experiences, leads to a philosophical study of human conduct in the form of theories of ethics and politics. Eventually, the spirit of inquiry and discontent, which results from larger and more complex experiences, leads to a philosophical study of human conduct in the form of theories of ethics and